Hey guys, it's Luca from Learning MTG, and today I want to make a video about valuing graded magic cards. So it's a huge mystery. No one knows how to price these things, and I don't blame them. I don't know how to price them. So today I'm just going to talk about some of my views on how I price cards. I'll use this card as an example. Right now it's listed for $400 by Card Kingdom. I thought I'd use a card that I don't own, so I'm like less biased about it, I guess. Um, yeah, just kind of talk about how do I think about evaluating these cards. I've talked to many different people. I've probably talked to 10 different people, and they've all given me different answers. So I'm just going to talk about it from my own perspective and using kind of like economic theory. I think is actually kind of useful here. So I'm finally making some use of the stuff I learned in grad school. I did. Yeah, I focused kind of on microeconomics or game theory. So one of the key idea, probably the most key idea of microeconomics is kind of this like supply and demand thing. Um, Basic idea being like a market clears where supply and demand kind of meet. So whatever price you'll find the same number of people willing to sell the item and the same people willing to buy the item is where you'll find your market price, right? It's going to be where these lines cross. You don't have to really understand this too well. I think the most important thing to remember here is that price is a function of both supply and demand, not just supply. It's, if it's very expensive to produce something but nobody wants it, then it can still be worthless. And it's not just a function of demand. If a lot of people really want something, doesn't mean it's going to be expensive if it's extremely cheap to supply, right? So it's kind of a balance of two different forces which eventually creates the price of something. So I want to talk about these things from both angles, right? Let's use this Dark as the igniter, and let's think about it from the supply side. I think for me, what's a very useful thing to think about is like a replacement cost, right? So what is the replacement cost? What would it cost me to produce one of these, right? So when it comes to graded magic cards, what is the process of producing a graded magic card? You basically have to buy the raw copy, you have to pay a company to grade it, and you have to do all the work in between of that, right? So you need to buy the card, make sure it's in good condition, you need to ship it out to the grading company, you need to organize your stuff. There's a lot of time involved with this. I'd say it takes at least a good 20 minutes to half an hour, maybe even an hour to do all the processing necessary to get a card graded. Maybe there's people doing it at a very high scale. They're doing hundreds or thousands of cards at a time, and it's very easy for them. But I think in general, it does take a lot of time and effort to grade a card. So here's what I use personally when I think about the replacement cost. So I'll say replacement cost for me is like the near mint price plus I add $50. Now, this $50 basically encapsulates the grading fees and the time required to take care of all the nonsense required for grading, right? So you have to, you have to fill out forms, you have to organize your cards, you have to receive mail, you have to mail things out, etc., etc. Now, grading costs vary between companies, right? So BGS, I don't know, at certain times, to grade a card, you'd have to pay $200. I think that's down now. Maybe it's like $100 to grade a card. I don't know, maybe it's $50, but I use $50. I also try to think about, like where are we headed, right? So to me, like if right this moment it costs $200 to grade a card, but 2 years from now it's going to cost $50, I'd rather just go with the 50. Like I'm trying to think about where are we headed. Also something to think about is like, what is AI going to do to this, right? I think it seems pretty clear to me that eventually we're going to have AI grading cards. and so that should also lower the cost of grading. But also you want to think about inflation. You know, what given inflation, what will grading cost in the future? I don't know. Kind of putting all these things together, I go with like a $50 thing. Yeah, so I think some people kind of, they'll like, you know, if a BGS card costs more to get graded, they'll value a BGS graded card more. I don't think so. I see the market kind of like interchangeably choosing between a BGS or a CGC when it comes to the foils. So to me, I just use kind of that $50 thing because I think a buyer, you know, assuming they don't care who's grading the card, you know, they're just going to pay you whatever that kind of like cheapest grading fee is. So I go with $50 personally. Okay, so this is, you know, kind of like let's just say these are the raw materials. You need $50 to deal with the grading fees and to deal with the labor, and you need to buy a near mint card. Okay, but now there's a probability of getting different grades, right? So just to make things simple, let's say there's like a 50% chance you get an 8.5 when you grade it, and there's a 50% chance you get a 9. So what kind of, what would be the cost of this and the cost of this? Again, pretty hard to say, really. You'd have to kind of know like what the premium for these things are, right? At the very least, you would know that, okay, maybe given this is what happens when you grade, okay, maybe the price of an 8.5 would actually be less than near mint plus $50, because, you know, basically the production costs are kind of lower than this, because you know that half the time you grade it, you're going to get something better, you're going to get more money. So I don't think you can kind of like mathematically deduce what the premium is given a situation like this, but you could know that, okay, if 8.5 is kind of like the low end of what you get on a graded, maybe it's worth a little bit less than this near mint plus 50, and then obviously the 9 is going to be more. Personally, this is what I do, and I'm totally open to changing these premiums, but this is what I do, and I think a lot of other people do, and I'm sure these will change rapidly over time. So for an 8.5, I do a 0% premium. So it's basically just near mint plus $50 is how I evaluate these. For a 9, I do a 50% premium. So it's near mint plus 50 and then 50% premium. For a 9.5, I do a 100% premium, I believe. Yeah. And then for 9.5 quad, I do a 200% premium. You know, are these correct, incorrect? Like, who knows? Right? We're kind of in the Wild West, and I think when I start to go over the other side of this, you'll start to realize why. So, yeah, so let's say we have this is our model, right? So let's say, you know, it costs $50 to go through all the processing of grading a card, and let's say half the time you get an 8.5 and half the time you get a 9. So we know that there's a floor price. We know for sure a 9, and you know, thinking from the supply side, has to be greater than near mint plus 50. It can't really be lower than this, right? So at least we have a floor price, which I think is useful. A lot of times in math, you can't really totally calculate something, but you can kind of calculate a lower and upper bound. So I think clearly, you know, for this Darigaz, we're going to think about what is the lower bound for this, right? So let's go to TCG. And let's see what a Darigaz is going for. And let's look at foil near mint. So the lowest price you can get it now is like $260. You know, assuming that there's no other websites that have a cheaper price, then this is like 260. $260 plus, and if you use my $50 and you're cool with that, then it should be at least a $310 card, and then you're going to add whatever premium you associated with the difficulty of getting a 9. So that's kind of a lower bound. Now let's talk about the upper bound. So we've talked about the supply side, now let's talk about the demand side. And this is where things get tricky, because we're dealing with a collectible, and a pretty rare collectible, right? So how many Darigazes are graded 9 or higher? I don't know, there might be like 20 in the entire world or something. You know, and let's say there's 3 9.5s, right? Actually, let's make this simpler. So between you and me, like we all know, there's probably about 20 of these that are graded above an 8.5. But let's say there's just 3 9s, right? There's 3 9.0s in the entire world. Okay. And let's say we have 3 foil collectors. One foil collector is super wealthy. He's willing to pay $1,000. The next guy, also a pretty wealthy guy, he's willing to pay $900 for one of these. And the next guy is just an investor. He's not really crazy about the foils, but he thinks these are going to be a good investment moving forward, and he values the card at $500. So according to economic theory, actually this will be the price. You basically, you list out who are the people willing to buy this card and what are they willing to pay, and you count down how many exist. There's 3 of them that exist, and so the third person that's willing to pay $500, the price will be $500. And then you have to, of course, check, is this greater than our 310? And 500 is your price, because it is in fact greater than 310. If it was less than 310, then no one would be willing to produce it. You know, you could say it's already been produced, so now the price will be lower, that's fine. But in general, you know, it's going to be above that value replacement cost. So yeah, I think this kind of wraps up the video. So I think the way that I like to think about this is like I use a lower bound of like, okay, this is the lower bound of what, you know, and it's based on a replacement cost. But that doesn't mean the price can't be much higher, right? So if the replacement cost of something is like $400, but people really, really want it, there's a lot of people that are looking for it, and there's not a lot of copies available, you know, you could have something with a replacement cost of $400, but it actually sells for $800. Now, in an efficient market, that's not really a stable outcome, right? Because if something's selling for $800 but the replacement cost is $400, people are going to start producing it, right? Because they can just flip it for a profit. So that's something to think about. You know, replacement cost could theoretically also be like a good measure of price if you're assuming the markets are super efficient. Yeah, I mean, and I'm not totally sold on that. I don't think these markets are very efficient because, like, you know, if you look at Adari guys, dude, there's 3 of them. Like, you know, let's say the graded copy is worth $800, and you're like, okay, yeah, I'm just gonna buy these, grade them, and flip them. Yeah, okay, you buy these 3. What is the price gonna be though? Like, if there's none left, if you sell out at $400, is the price of a raw copy gonna go up to $500, $600, $700? I think it definitely would. So, you know, and then if the raw price goes up, then all of a sudden the production price is down, and so, you know, the price is going to adjust upwards. So those are just some of my thoughts on these. How do you evaluate these things? I think as I buy and sell more and more of these foil graded cards, I'll have more of an understanding of how to evaluate them, but I think this is a useful framework where you kind of think of the replacement cost. Think of just purely what would it cost me to replace this, use that as kind of a lower bound, and then realize that given the demand, sky's the limit. If a lot of people need them and there's not a lot available, it could be worth a whole lot. Especially if you're dealing with cards that are like 9.5s or 9.5 quads. All of a sudden you don't even know what the replacement cost is because you may just not be able to replace them, right? Like if there's three Dargazes available right now, in my estimation, from now until the end of time, how many will you be able to grade? Maybe like 30, maybe 10x of this, maybe 20x of this, 60, right? Out of those 60, how many of them are going to be 9.5s or 9.5 quads? I don't know. It could be 1, 2, 3. I mean, I'm kind of just throwing out numbers, but if there's only going to be a handful left in existence, what really is the replacement cost? It's quite high. And you could be in a situation where there is no replacement cost because you just can't replace them, right? And which is kind of the idea of a super valuable collectible, is that it can't be replaced. You can't just go make another one. There's none left. And so then you can't really think about replacement cost anymore. And then you're just purely thinking about what are people willing to pay for these things, which, going on a tangent, kind of depends on the wealth of the people that are in demand of these things. If something is super rare, if let's say there's only 3 copies in the world, and the wealth of the 3 people that want them 10x's, the price could theoretically 10x. If the way that they choose to value them is a percentage of their net worth or something. So just some food for thought, how to value these things. I think we're all kind of learning as we go. The foil graded cards is a brand new space and everyone's learning, and it's pretty exciting. I just had a conversation with someone today on eBay talking about this. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.